have a couple comments that I would like to offer regarding the grand opening of the Queen Mother Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Visitor Center in her hometown of Bucktown, Maryland. I had the honor, privilege, and blessing of visiting Queen Mother's so-called visitor center yesterday afternoon just before closing. I was fortunate enough to make it there on time. I didn't know that time had went up. I didn't know that time had went up. So I almost missed my visit, but thank God I made it there on time, and appreciate the support of the ancestors in getting me there safely. So coincidental that on the day she transitioned, time moved up. Facts. On the day we celebrate the 104th anniversary transition of the Queen Mother of Black Revolution, time went up. Facts. So a couple quick assessments of the Harriet Tubman National Underground Railroad Visitor Center. Number one, it was too small. It was too small for a woman of such enormous proportions, for an ancestor of such magnitude, for a hero, a shero of such gigantic impact. I would expect this center to have been more thorough than what it was. If someone does not know who Queen Mother Harriet Tubman was, if someone doesn't understand the role and impact that she played in Pan-Africanist history, they should be able to walk into that center and get a glimpse, a serious glimpse of the impact and role in life of someone of the stature of a Queen Mother Harriet Tubman. But you don't get that. If you walk into that visitor center and you leave it, you will think she was another ordinary quote-unquote black who may have done something newsworthy but did not accomplish anything that was worth remembering. So it was an insult to her legacy. To put this in her hometown, you can get through the whole thing in 30 minutes, going slow, maybe 45 minutes. But I would say it's a 30-minute stop. I guess that's why they call it a visitor center instead of a museum, because it ain't but a 30-minute visit. Now, mind you, Bucktown still pretty much looks the way it looked in Queen Mother Harriet's time. You have to drive almost 2 hours even from Baltimore to get there. People coming from other states are going to be driving even farther distances to get here. So because it does take a trek through the woods, not on feet, but through your car. Okay, you have to drive through some bridges, and you got to drive through some grasslands to get there, all paved, totally roaded, but nonetheless, it is in the boondocks, which is good. I'm glad the area is undisturbed, but when people take their time to come there to learn about this great ancestor, I would expect that the impression be greater than what I was left with. It should have been greater. The impression and impact should have been greater than what I was left with. So number one, it was too small. The size itself was disrespectful. The size itself was an insult. And just like that trifling Smithsonian Museum in DC, just like that ridiculous African American National Museum in DC, most of the information was nothing but the regular, everyday facts and stats that are rehearsed in public school a million times over about Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, much like the museum. There was no context given for Harriet Tubman's work. I repeat, there was no context given for Harriet Tubman's work. What am I talking about? The context was a war on the life of African people. The context was the greatest human disaster, the greatest human unnatural disaster of all time. The context was the Ma'afa of African people. The context was a dehumanization campaign, the likes of which the world has never seen before and may never see again. There was no context. No information in the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center that gives you any degree of understanding of the negativistic reality of everyday slavery for African people. How can a visitor center dedicated to a woman who dedicated her life to the eradication of slavery not discuss slavery? How could there not be context? How could the life and works of Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, Araminta Ross, not be put in an appropriate context for people to appreciate it? How can you do that? And then I'm also noticing within this sanitization of African history, within this sanitization of African history within the American narrative, there is an increasing tendency to refer to African heroes and sheroes as American heroes. How in the hell can Harriet Tubman have been an American hero when she was a fugitive of the law? How can Araminta Ross be an American hero when she was a fugitive of justice? How can Harriet Tubman be an American hero when the United States government refused to give her a soldier's pension after being the only woman in the Civil War to lead troops into battle? And when she applied for her soldier's pension, she was denied it. She was ultimately given a pension, but not for herself. She was only given it after her late husband, her second husband, had died, and she was able to collect a widow's pension. So the government refused this woman. She was a nurse, a spy, she was a scout, she was a general, and you deny her a pension? And you got the nerve to call her an American hero? You allow bounty hunters and slave catchers, you allowed her slave master to put a $40,000 bounty on Harriet Tubman's head, wanted, dead or alive. The signs were all over America, all up and down the East Coast, a $40,000 bounty. A $40,000 bounty in the 1850s and 1860s is about $3 million today. A $40,000 bounty in the 1850s and 1860s is like a $3 million reward today. And you got the audacity to call her a hero when she and all the members of her race were not even considered to be people, when she and all the members of her race were not even considered to be living human beings. We were considered chattel and property to be owned and used and discarded, and you allowed this black woman to be mistreated and hunted like a dog, and you got the audacity to turn around and call her an American hero. Are you kidding me? Harriet Tubman, an American hero. Frederick Douglass, an American hero. He had to go all the way to Europe, and some white folks paid and bought his freedom in Europe so he could come back and keep the fight up for American freedom. And you got the audacity to call him a hero when he was a fugitive of law? Harriet Tubman, a fugitive of law. Look at how they sanitize in our history. Look at how they sanitize in our history. Now Harriet Tubman is an American hero, but if she would have been caught and hung, you wouldn't have said nothing. If she would have been caught and hanged, you would have never referred to her as a hero. Not only that, many of the slave catchers who were after Queen Mother Harriet said that they did not intend to kill with a gunshot or bring her back alive. And you can do your research. They intended to burn her at the stake as they did Joan of Arc in Europe. They intended to burn Queen Mother Harriet Tubman to death, burn her to death. $40,000 bounty, sanctioned by the United States government, the same government that built that visitor center, the same government that built that trifling visiting center that opened up 2 days ago, is the same government that legitimized her dehumanity, the same government that allowed a bounty to be put on her head, the same government that allowed her to be hunted like a dog. And black people, we can never, ever, ever forgive the United States government for what it did to us. Don't you ever in your life even think about breaking breath to say times is all right. Times is not all right. We being hunted again. Trayvon Martin was hunted down like a dog. Michael Brown hunted down like a dog. Eric Garner hunted down like a dog. Philando Castile, Alton Sterling, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice. We can go all night. Don't you ever give them a pass. You know what else was interesting? When I was at the visitor center, they had a handout. Harriet Tubman grand opening handout. Different activities. So I'm looking at the different activities. And right here it says, games enslaved children played. Games enslaved children played. Learn the history of games that enslaved children played and create your own piece of art. From 12 to 4 p.m. Stop in any time. Let me read it again so you don't think I'm lying. Games enslaved children played. Learn the history of games that enslaved children played and create your own piece of art. Do you see what's going on? Here we go again with the sanitization. Slave children didn't have any damn fun playing no games. Did you know that children in slavery normally went around naked like animals? You were not even given a piece of cloth until you was old enough to work. Our little girls ran around with their vaginas out. Our little sons ran around with their penises exposed. They wasn't even given a loincloth or potato sack to cover up until they was old enough to work. Could you imagine your child walking outside naked, butt ass naked, until their age of 7, 8, or 9 when they're old enough to go and work? They treated our children like animals, and you talking about games they played? Do you know how many black children were molested and sodomized, sleeping in the bed with the slave masters? Thomas Jefferson wasn't the only pedophile. Sally Hemings wasn't the only victim of slave master pedophilia. Thousands, tens of thousands of the slave masters would make our daughters and sons sleep in the bed with them so they could rape them at night. And you talking about games that slave children play like they have fun. Totally distorting. Totally distorting. Totally distorting the life of Africans in slavery. Frederick Douglass even tells you in his narrative, when it was cold, the only bed he had to climb up inside of a potato sack and try to keep warm, and his feet usually froze. Queen Mother Harriet talked about how when she was a child, they hired her out so she could go and hunt muskrats in the water. She caught measles. Queen Mother Harriet Tubman contracted the measles by being out in that filthy Bucktown, Maryland water. A little girl, standing up in water up to her neck, catching muskrats. And you talking about games enslaved children play. They didn't have time for no games. If they wasn't being raped, they was working. I said if they wasn't being raped, they was working. And you got white kids and black kids out under that tent playing games like slavery was some sort of romanticized interaction between slave masters and their victims. There wasn't nothing romantic about no damn slavery. Are you crazy? This is what y'all open this museum for, to sanitize our history and whitewash the true reality, the true brutality, the true dehumanization of African people in America during the Ma'afa. This is unacceptable, brothers and sisters. Another thing I didn't like, too many white folk were in charge of the whole grand opening. Everything was ran by white folk. You had a couple blacks. You had the brother who designed it. You had his sister playing Harry. You had a couple blacks, but the whole thing was basically ran by whites. How they telling our story? How they telling our story?